Call the meeting to order at 12:17. And Sue, you want to do attendance?
Board Member Meister?
Here.
Board Member Doyle?
Here.
Board Member Larkin?
Present.
Board Member Lonnet?
Here.
Board Member Springer?
Here.
Board Members Yankovic and McClure are absent today, and Chair Reagan.
Here. And we need to approve the absence of Cliff and April.
So moved.
Motion by Dean, is there a second by Mike Springer? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And we need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Mike, is there a second?
Sure.
Brian? And any discussion or changes to the agenda? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And we have copies of the minutes from November 5. Need a motion to approve the minutes from November 5.
You can remember back
Yeah, that's why they print them out.
Oh. I'll make that motion.
Hey, Dean, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mike Larkin. Any discussion or changes or notification of errors at all? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Item 5, public comments for items not on the agenda.
You missed
I
one.
missed one. Oh, treasurer's report, excuse me. Treasurer's report?
Our current balance is $928,172. I wanted to mention I have $9,000 more in TIPA revenue that will be added. And I will be making the transfer out for the City Hall and $43,000 for the Presidential Street Project. And the 43 was committed, there's $110,000 that's on your packet. 43 was for the President Street Project, and the balance will be for the Monroe Street Project. Yeah. I know.
Make a motion, treasurer's report be approved as submitted.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mike Springer. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Now, item 5, public comments for items not on the agenda. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to old business in our downtown development plan. Everyone has a copy of that, I think, from the last meeting. I don't think there's any changes on that at all. We didn't have to make any actions on that at all. South Monroe parking lot, any update on that?
The only update that I have on this is we have a public notice that went out for a variance hearing, a zoning board of appeals hearing at the next city council meeting.
Okay.
I think that, yeah, we have some that,
Ron, you address that?
Staff have been working with Dave Austin and doing some works on detailed plans and specifications for the South Monroe parking lot and utilities that we're proposing to construct. We're proposing to construct new water main as part of the M21 project from James Street to North Grove. And also, we need to make the connection for the South Monroe parking lot for the utility loop, for the water main connection needs to be made near the Veterans Park area so that we can loop the water main behind the buildings and connect to South Monroe. So we're going to loop the water main around behind the buildings. We're at a critical juncture at this point. We have detailed plans and specifications ready for the bidding process for those utilities and for the South Monroe parking lot, the complete parking lot back there. If you recall, we had an issue with regards to some of the property swap, and we talked about potentially doing that parking lot in 2 phases because of the uncertainty with regards to the property swap with between Lowell Granite and Mr. Canfield. Had to do with that, the old button factory foundation and the elevated piece of concrete back there that was built in order to be able to do the entire parking lot project. That concrete structure would have to go. It's my understanding that property swap has not taken place. My advice to the city and to our engineers, I would prefer to be able to at least get all of the utilities constructed through that area, regardless of whether or not we're going to be able to construct the parking lot at this time. If you notice, we had a sign back there that said coming spring 2016, and we had a rendering of the entire parking lot. We have since taken that sign down, given the uncertainty with regards to the parking lot, the property swap, and whether or not we're going to be able to build that parking lot in its entirety. So we're at a critical juncture right now in terms of we need to get these plans and specifications out for bid. We need to get them submitted to the state for permits to do the construction, especially with regards to the work that's being done on M21. We need to make those connections at those critical points before MDOT comes through and does the work on M21. So I've just had a brief conversation before the meeting with Mr. Canfield. I don't know where we're at with regards to the property swap to be able to construct that parking lot in its entirety. We had talked about doing it in phases. We're all set to do the entire thing, but just wanted to let you know that there's still a degree of uncertainty. Dave Austin is here. He's got the detailed plans. We've got the information. We're going to submit everything to the state. One of the critical things that we also need, if we're not going to construct the parking lot, we need an easement through the back part of the parking lot, so through the area back there from Lowell Granite to be able to construct the utilities even. So we're at a critical juncture now in terms of trying to get this project done.
Okay. Dave, anything that you could add to that at all? Or? No?
Okay.
Ron, I got maybe as far as the water main and stuff, the buildings, as far as they ever wanted to put a water suppression in there, as the type of diameter of the water main going in there, if they wanted to hook up to that would be sufficient? Or, because I know some of where our block is, the water main's really pretty small. And
right. And the way that we have it designed right now, we have 3 separate pipes coming off of the main water main that we would put in there. We'd valve those off and we'd bring those pipes up towards the back of the building so that in the future the owners of the buildings could connect directly to that water main for fire suppression.
And any idea when M21 MDOT's going to do on Main Street at all?
They're going to get started April, late April.
Okay.
Jeff is here now, so maybe this helps. He just leave
Okay.
rush away. Thank you.
Didn't know anything about the meeting, so. You had questions for me?
Just mainly, Ron was alluding to, we're trying to get the easement and the paperwork, as far as the land swap completed, and if there's anything that the DDA can expedite this, or the city, that we can help out, from our end, to speed up the process. That's all we're trying to do.
Okay, as far as I'm concerned, the land swap between Greg and I think we're completely good with swapping the properties. I guess the last meeting I put this, they wanted an easement across the property that I own currently. And I said not until we come to some conclusion as far as the agreement between Greg and I.
Okay.
As far as
Pretty close now then.
If we have an agreement that the swap is okay, and it's
at the last meeting we were talking values, and we didn't think And at the last meeting, it was really, nothing was brought, or nothing was concluded that Greg wanted a certain amount for his property. So there was a lot of things that had to be happened first. But it's okay with the swap.
We can do the swap if I agree to give you the same, if we both agree to give you the easement, that gives you the easement that you need. Does that,
We would have to have,
in writing?
we have to have the easement in place from whoever the property owner
Yes.
That's not, that's why I want the swap to go through first.
is. Yeah.
Right, they have, kind of this week, they need to pull the trigger on some stuff to make things happen because of the deadline with MDOT reviewing Main Street. I mean, if we write up an agreement that we're swapping that this week,
The city's not in agreement that they're gonna do the swap yet.
well, the city doesn't, we're gonna trade whether the city gets
But
the piece from me or not.
The last meeting, you stated that you wanted X amount of money for your property.
I don't want to go backwards, but
Okay.
if, I think we'll be able to work that out. It's not, we're not that far apart on things. If it ends up that the city and I can't come to an agreement, which I think is a 1% chance, I think, you know, the reason I purchased that property was to make the parking lot happen. I just don't want to sell something that I paid $25,000 for $10,000. I don't think we're going to have to. I don't think that's a problem. We'll work through this, but our goal is to keep this thing moving forward. Whether I end up owning that piece instead of the corner, I still give you the easement, you know, you still get the easement either way. I think the city will end up with everything, but I think there's some need to wrap this up from Dave's standpoint to move forward with bids and make this happen.
And I don't think, you know, I don't want to put Jeff and Greg on the spot to do this openly, so, well, you can do that at your leisure as long as the DDA and Ron knows that it's working. You know, in the process, we'll let the individual parties kind of work that out. I don't think it's, I don't want to put you guys in the spot.
The point was just, can we facilitate anything?
Right, yeah.
That's all.
That's all we're
If the city
trying.
wants to buy the easement right now, you can have it, and I'll sign it today.
There you go.
How much is the easement?
That's a golden figure.
We'll let that city manager iron
Nobody's,
that out.
as far as,
The acting city manager.
there's lots of things that I've asked from the city, and I haven't gotten any reply from the city or the council, so, but, so that's just,
Okay.
I'm not too happy the way things have
Thank
gone.
you.
So where are we standing then?
So we can, I'm going to draft an easement, and the name of the property owner will be blank, and I'll give it to the two parties, and it sounds like they've got to close their deal, and then whoever ends up owning that parcel can sign the easement.
And with that, then we can go ahead.
And we're going to go ahead anyways. The easement is necessary for us to get a permit from the Department of Environmental Quality. So there's a little bit of time. All the other things can go ahead. So we're just going to move ahead as if this is all going to work out, because otherwise we'll get too far behind.
Right. That's a concern.
And it was our understanding that the city was gonna help facilitate the swap, correct?
I mean, the DDA can help out too. I mean, if we need to, we can have a special meeting, you know, if there's,
Back when Mark was manager, Dick was drafting up papers to do the swap and everything, so I don't know where anything's at now.
okay. So maybe we can give Dick a call and find out whether
Is
there's.
that something you could look into, Dave, and see if Dick
Yep.
went and started something? If he hasn't, maybe, I mean, you have the...
I'll check with them.
Yeah, I think you have the property descriptions that are
Right.
already free
Sure.
parcels.
That was part of the swap deal, as far as having the city attorneys do the paperwork, like the
Well, we-
last time I did a swap.
We want to do whatever's needed to get this going.
Thank you.
Okay. Economic development, we don't need to take any action on that, I assume, okay? We're just going to let the private parties work that out. Economic development. If there's any report on that at all. Otherwise, we'll move on to new business. And we have some tentative dates. It's usually the first Thursday after the first city council meeting. So kind of pencil those dates down. And sometimes we have conflicts to change them, but that's usually when they are. I think we need a motion to approve those dates too. Okay.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Mike Larkin, second by Dean. And any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Okay, parking strategy report. I know they did a report on that, and just kind of introduce yourselves and got a report for us.
Yes, thank you. We put together a short presentation for you guys as well. And so what we're going to talk about is the parking assessment and strategy that we put together several months ago. This has been a process that we've worked on for probably a year and a half. For those of you who don't know me and know a bunch of people here, my name is Andy Moore. I'm with Williams & Works. I'm the Lowell City Planner. So I've seen several people here at the Planning Commission meetings. I'm here every month, helping with various zoning and planning issues in the city. With me is Nathan Maymed, who's one of our staff planners at Williams & Works. He actually did the bulk of the work on the parking strategy as far as developing the assessment and analyzing the zoning ordinance, counting spaces, and he'll kind of walk through how he did all of this. But with the discussion that we had, or that you have had over the last several months on the downtown development plan, part of that is parking, obviously. There's a perception that there's a parking shortage here, and so we kind of walked through the whole process to determine if there is a shortage, if there is, where, how it relates to zoning, how it relates to actual demand, and then there are some suggestions we have moving forward to help manage parking. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nathan. He's going to walk through the background and the methodology for the study, and then we'll talk about recommendations, solutions, ideas moving forward that we can all be thinking about, and how it all ties in together, and how we can move forward. So,
thank you, Andy. I'll go over a little bit of the methodology as far as the parking assessment is concerned. I took 2 trips out to Lowell in September and October of 2014 to do a lot of counting of spaces. I first start off, I surveyed the existing public and private parking capacity in downtown. Not only the public parking spaces, but public street parking as well, and private spaces by parcel basis. I then surveyed the current uses downtown, talking to business owners, also surveying storefront to storefront, what the use was at the time in September, October, as well as looked at the zoning ordinance parking requirements for each one of those uses and the ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers parking generation, and compared the two. The ITE is just for comparison purposes only. It's not, the analysis was done primarily with that of the zoning ordinance. This was the result of the survey. It's divided into various groups of public parking, public street parking. Get to my map here. As well as I sorted no parking, restricted parking, depending on 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. or restricted parking 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. That was largely based upon signs. However, I did talk to the DPW department to kind of go over areas that I was unsure about. Some signs were missing, or I wasn't exactly sure how the extent of which those areas were no parking. Each one of the numbers correlates with a parcel again. Some of those say 0, so the parcels downtown here where you have the parcel entirely taken up by a building would obviously have no parking. However, a lot of that is due to the fact that there's shared parking downtown, you have public parking spaces, street parking, etc. This overall view of the boundary we have is we used the same boundaries as the downtown placemaking plan. So I'll get into a little bit more detail. We chose 5 study areas downtown that we did a little bit more assessment with, but overall parking downtown, there's a surplus of 185 spaces. That's largely due to the fact that some of the parking lots towards the edges, the eastern and western edges of the downtown are more suburban in nature, so there's large parking lots, the bank, the restaurant, a few things like that. They sort of offset the numbers. However, downtown, it's a little bit of a different story. think we can go on to the next slide here. These are the 5 parking blocks that we went over. We chose a lot of these based upon the fact that people generally, when they park, don't necessarily want to walk that far. And crossing Main Street is sort of a deterrent depending on traffic volumes and speed and things of that nature. So each one of these, Lene Wells and I from our office went through after a walk through downtown and chose them sort of based upon the idea that people who park in these areas are generally walking to these businesses.
Can I ask a question? You said there's 185 space surplus.
Yes.
How many, for how many total did you?
That is, there's a current supply of 1,766 spaces within that
percentage
general area. Percentage I do not have off the top of my head.
185 of, call it 8%, but
Yeah.
10%-ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
So parking block 1, we look at this table shows different parking demands. So obviously different uses have different times at which they generate parking demand. So bars and restaurants, after 5 o'clock till 10 o'clock, banks, insurance companies, general office use, those are daytime uses, so 8 to 5. So each of these are divided into when that parking demand would occur. Also, it shows for this parking block current public parking, current private parking, and then total current available. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a deficiency. As far as future demand, there was also a future demand calculated for this parking block of 429. Now that's assuming with the current existing zoning ordinance standards that there will be 100% occupancy in that parking block. So compared to total current available, there will be a fairly large deficiency. However, that's again being calculated with your current parking standards and your zoning ordinance, which will largely reflect more of a suburban style development. Parking block 2, similar story here. Again, you have a little bit of a deficiency. Future demand is 115 spaces with a current available of 64. Again, it's divided into different demand peak times, depending upon which businesses and uses are located within that block. 3 also has a deficiency. We're looking at future demand of 430 in this block with an existing supply of 284. And again, everything's divided into various peak demand times, depending upon the uses and businesses which are located within that block. 4, we have future demand of 143 with existing supply of 78. And again, the same divided up peak times. Parking block 5 was the only one in this study, in these 5 study areas that has surplus. It also had a future demand of 121. However, this is largely due to vacant structure nearby and also a large parking lot, or partially vacant structure nearby and a large parking lot. But this was the only one in the downtown area that had a surplus. Each one of these goes over those five block areas. Again, the blue in the corner had the largest surplus, and the red over in the left had the largest deficiency. Red, part of the reason why there's a large deficiency over there is because of the theater. The parking standards for the theater in your zoning ordinance require quite a few spaces. However, that theater is generally underutilized, so you don't have a whole lot of, I'm not even sure if it's still being used. But in terms of calculating a lot of the parking requirements down there, or projected demand for parking down there, was due to that theater and having a large number of seats. The current parking standards are largely what created that proposed or the existing deficiency.
You didn't take into account that that's not a theater anymore
We at the time were told that it was occasionally used
as a theater?
for events. So in terms of calculating parking, it is because of the theater space having that many seats. If it is used, it's possibly used as something similar or for large crowds. So it was, when we were looking at it, it was that standard reflected something similar to what it could possibly be used as. So instead of choosing parking that would be based on like a restaurant, retail, the theater parking demand would be the closest to what it would be possibly used as. So,
It's used for 100 to 150 people when it's used.
right. Any questions on any of the parking blocks or of the methodology for the assessment or anything like that downtown? All right, I'll pass it on to Amy for park strategy.
Great, thank you. So, as you guys can see, there's a lot of work that Nathan did going into this and just identifying each and every use, identifying how many public spaces there were, how many private spaces there were. And then also looking at, again, assuming everything is 100% occupied in what we would consider to be a reasonable capacity. So again, for example, using that theater, that assumes that somebody would walk in tomorrow and say, you know what, this is going to be a theater full-time, we're going to fill it up 5 days a week, and this is how much parking we would need based on the zoning ordinance. So when we're talking in this case about deficiencies in parking, that's based on the zoning ordinance standard. That is not necessarily based on what every use is really going to generate. Because the zoning ordinance, as you guys know, it's a best attempt, but it's an imperfect tool in actually requiring parking. And your zoning ordinance assumes a fairly suburban model of parking generation in that. Now, if we're out on West Main Street, you go to one of the businesses, you park, you go in, you get back in your car, you just go to that one store generally, and then you leave and drive somewhere else. That's not quite the case down here because everything is just so much more compact and because the parking, everything is just developed differently. There's no real need to drive in your car to each and every individual business. You can park once, you can go to 3 or 4 places if you need to, and then get in your car and leave. And so it's not necessarily always a great idea to identify, this one use generates this many spaces, and so we just total them all up to have our parking downtown, because then you're going to have thousands of spaces that you don't need, and we'll get into why here in a little bit. So once we sort of had this assessment and this inventory of what was there, we looked at the parking policies in the zoning ordinance. We looked at some of the other parking policies that are actually in the just in other city ordinances. For example, there's no overnight parking allowed. I forget the hours, it's 2 to 6 or something. But you can't leave your car in an on-street spot overnight. There are hours of parking restrictions when they apply, when they don't. And then again, there are zoning ordinance standards that we also need to pay attention to. So as a part of this strategy, we really identified 4 sort of categories, I guess, of recommendations. There are price-based solutions, there are supply-based solutions, there are time-based solutions, and there are education-based solutions is how we categorize them. We're not saying that you need to jump in and do all of these right away. Some of them are going to be more feasible, more appetizing to you guys and to the city than others. But again, each one has kind of a specific goal, and if nothing else, we think they're all worthy of consideration. So talking about price-based solutions, again, here our goal is to promote convenience, turnover, choice, and predictability for parking, especially during peak hours. There are a number of ways that can be managed. There can be a pricing program, so maybe certain lots or certain spaces have a fee attached to them. Could be something as simple as installing street meters, and then obviously there are enforcement of those things. There's a lot of flexibility built into these kinds of programs. For example, if we put meters on the street, that doesn't mean that they have to be on and enforced 24 hours a day. Lots of cities only require you to pay the meter between certain hours, like even in Grand Rapids, it's 8 to 6 or something like that, or 8 to 8 maybe now, but they change it. Certain days of the week, certain seasons of the year. There are towns in northern Michigan that pull the meters right out in the winter because all the tourists go home. So there's all kinds of flexibility and all kinds of options here as far as as far as pricing goes, and it doesn't even have to be that expensive. But one of the benefits of these price-based solutions is that it encourages turnover of the spaces. It's not somebody pulls in, parks on the street, whether it's an employee or somebody that just says, hey, meet me here, and then we'll go have lunch, and then we'll ride together and go do something else for 7 hours while I leave my car on the street. It encourages turnover of the space. It encourages people to move, to free up that space, put their car someplace else. And that's one of the real benefits here. Also, it can also encourage biking, for example. If there are places to put your bike, maybe people are less inclined to bother with paying or worrying about when they have to pay and when they don't. And so then maybe they'll just ride the bike instead, and then just not occupy a parking spot at all. The next type of solution, here we have some recommendations for where we would actually meter. So the blue there, those are off-street parking lots that are public, and so you'll see on Main Street the orange stripes on either sides of the road there of Main Street. Those are the areas where we would suggest meters if you were to do that. You don't have to meter every spot in every off-street lot. The on-street spaces, because they are so close to the front of so many businesses, are often the most attractive, and so those would probably make sense to meter those first. The other ones, off-street parking, would be free. And this doesn't take into account, as you can see, the spot behind, or off of Monroe Street that would, will hopefully be constructed here within the next, few months over the summer. So there will be some additions to that. Supply-based solutions. Again, this is looking at how we can manage the supply. Look at the zoning ordinance to kind of figure out where we can work with the zoning ordinance to not require so much parking, because again, the zoning ordinance relies heavily upon a very suburban model, which is fine for West Main Street. It's not so fine for downtown because the uses are so mixed. There's so much overlap in terms of when businesses and when uses are being occupied. It's very different. So again, the goal here is to maintain the vitality of downtown Lowell by maintaining adequate market-based supply of parking that serves the needs of existing and future businesses, while avoiding excessive supplies that interrupt the historic streetscape and character of downtown. And that's one of the really big things that I think is important to remember. Every place in the city is that we have a parking lot. We don't have a building. We don't have a valuable, interesting, tax revenue generating building or business occupying that space. It's just sitting there being used for car storage. That's certainly necessary to some degree to have parking lots, but and I think those of you who have been to the planning commission meetings before have heard me kind of harp on the fact that I don't want parking to stand in the way of good development. If we have if we're flexible in parking and if we have a parking problem, that's not necessarily a bad problem to have, because that means that there's a lot of people coming downtown, which is of course what we all want. And so there are a number of things that we can do here within zoning to help with this sort of supply-based solution. So reduce or eliminate parking minimums. What we mean by that is in the zoning ordinance, in most zoning ordinances, including yours, it says for every retail business, thou shalt have 200 or one space per 200 square feet of floor area of your building or something like that. And it's a minimum number. So we might do the math and say, okay, this guy requires 8 spaces. He might decide to put in 36 spaces, but he only has to put in 8. And so it basically encourages him to build lots of parking if he wants to. That is expensive. Again, it takes up valuable space that could otherwise be used for buildings, and all that starts to, especially if it's on Main Street, it starts to kind of degrade the character of the street overall, because everyone would rather walk by a building or a storefront with interesting things in the windows and restaurants and everything else than just to look at a bunch of cars. Similarly, we can add parking maximums, which is another thing that some communities have done to sort of reduce the amount of just excessive asphalt we have used for parking lots in the city. So instead of saying thou shalt have a minimum of one space per 200 square foot, we'll say you shall have a maximum of one space per 200 square feet or 250 square feet, or whatever that number would be. And then lastly, there are shared parking arrangements, which can be very beneficial because the standards in the ordinance are all based on, if we say one space per 200 square feet, the kind of assumption there is that that use will require that one parking space 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We know that's not true for almost everything. So any kind of shared parking arrangements where there are two business owners willing to sort of cooperate, there can be an overall reduction in the number of spaces needed, especially if there's an overlap based on the nature of the use. So if there's, let's say, a bank that is next to a restaurant or some kind of residential unit, the bank is going to generate its parking need primarily from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 or whatever. The residential use or a restaurant is generally going to generate most of its parking demand after 5. So instead of having a large number of spaces that are perpetually 30% full, we could have a far fewer number of spaces and just have a more full parking lot. So there's just a much more efficiency of use overall. The next type of solution that we talked about is time-based solution. And again, a lot of the regulations the city has are based on time. So again, overnight there is a current prohibition of parking between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. for on-street parking. So again, as we hope to increase the amount of residences and mixed-use types of development that's downtown, maybe someone should be able to park their car on the street overnight. In the winter, maybe there's odd even parking that we can do so we can help still get the snow out. But using those spaces on the street instead of building new parking generally will help to overall use the spaces that are there more efficiently. Looking at the times at which the restrictions apply, currently it's, I want to say 8 to 5, Monday through Friday or something like that, and not on Saturday or Sunday. Maybe we take a look at when the restrictions apply. Maybe those hours are expanded, maybe they're modified a little bit to see what works best. Determining time limits for on-street spaces. So again, maybe it's the first hour free, first 30 minutes free, then you got to feed the meat or something like that. And then lastly, kind of the theme with a lot of these, as you're probably noticing, is enforcing them with monitoring and ticketing if you need to. All the rules and regulations in the world aren't going to do you a whole lot of good if you're not willing to actually enforce them. Eventually people will say, yeah, I never paid the meter because they never give me a ticket anyways. Well, that's fine. Once they get a ticket, they might change their tune. But if you never ticket them, if you never enforce the rules, then there's not a lot of good reason to have the rules there in the first place. And then the last type of solution that we looked at are what we call education-based solutions. So I think there's a lot that can be done to inform business owners, to inform the public as to what the policies are, if there are time-based solutions or solutions involving the meters, if there were meters. Maybe we just work to inform this is when it's enforced, this is when you can park here, this is when you can't, these are the days that we're going to enforce it, those kinds of things. There can be mailings involved, notifying everybody of the parking policy changes. There can be wayfinding signage so that we're directing people to the public lots, or we're signing the public parking lot so everyone knows this is free public parking. One thing that I've heard in a lot of different communities over the years is that there's a lot of public parking, but nobody knows it's there. It's not signed. It doesn't say public parking. There's no directional arrows. They just think it's some guy's parking lot, and that if they park there without permission, they're going to get a ticket, or they're going to get towed, so they don't know. So I think part of that is going to be making sure that we are as efficiently as possible using the spaces that we have, making sure that there's an overall efficiency there. There's always, everyone knows where it is, and things like that. And then lastly, there can be meetings between local business owners. The city, of course, could help facilitate them. Just to talk about parking strategy, figuring out what's working, what's not. Maybe we do talk about modifying hours of which things are enforced, tweaking the rules here or there, coming up with some recommendations just to generally encourage more more efficiency of the parking that's here. Again, the overall results of all the counting of spaces was kind of interesting because it does show that there is, based on zoning, there is a deficiency in real life. It's not so much a deficiency. Moving forward, maybe there is, but at the same time, if we're making sure that we're maximizing how efficiently everything is used, that's less money that the city or the DDA has to sink into parking. And again, it'll help keep things moving, keep spaces turned over, and keep us moving forward, allowing to use the land downtown for buildings, for businesses, for residences, instead of parking lots. So I think that about wraps it up for us. If you have questions,
Is there a time limit on the parking on Main Street now? Do we have that signed?
I don't know if there's 2 hours, yeah, so, yeah, some of it could be just signage and just making sure that everything is signed so it's clear that there's 2 hour parking, and then again, if it's obvious that someone's been there for 6 hours, then enforce it, give them a ticket. It doesn't have to be a huge ticket. I mean, $10 or $5 or something often will get someone's attention enough by itself.
Since our goal is not to provide parking, our goal is to facilitate an environment where the businesses can thrive, is there any consideration that either the paid parking and or enforcement actually is counter to the goal?
I think that's a bit of a misconception. I mean, if it's out.
It's a question. It's not.
Yeah,
it's a question.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think again, there has to be a reasonable balance between not making it so we're discouraging people from coming downtown by charging too much for parking, or making it so scarce that everyone has to walk 7 blocks and they would just rather go somewhere else. We understand that it has to be reasonably close to the businesses, and I think part of figuring out what works here is going to be working with the public, working with the business owners to really figure out where people can park, where they want to park, how much they're willing to pay. Again, if some spots were metered, it doesn't have to be, 75 cents for every 15 minutes. I mean, it can be pretty cheap, and usually those minor things don't have a huge effect on the overall vibrancy of your downtown.
I'd have to agree with you, Dean. If, let's say we're at 2 hour parking right now, and you have grandma, she comes to the store, and she goes to the dentist, and she goes to get something to eat. 2.5 hours go by, she gets a ticket from enforcing it. I think she's mad. I think I lost a customer. So I think there is some adverse effects to enforcing parking.
Yeah.
So it's just something to think about.
Yeah, and again, it's kind of tough because I don't want things to be so strict that someone's sitting there going, all right, it's been 2 hours and 34 seconds ticket. But if it's been 7 hours, okay, maybe that's a bit of a different story. So
I think that's why the
there's a
signs are out there
balance.
to help, we can do it,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't really enforce it.
Yeah, or at least enforce only the most egregious violations, yeah. So I think that's part of an overall strategy that maybe needs to be worked out with the city, with the DDA, with the public, with business owners and things like that.
I think the other thing, that we did, and my employees are as guilty as anybody, they park behind our lot, but then they might park next door to Backwater, or they may not park in front of their business, but they park in front of somebody else's. So it's part of an education that we need to maybe jointly with the chamber educate the business owners. There are some public lots that can be used. It might be further than as the weather gets a little bit nicer. Maybe some of the employees will be told, not asked, to park in the public lots instead of in front of some other business.
Right.
One of the things that we've talked about, Mike, we've talked about it many times, is permit parking for employees. not our visitors, not the people that are coming in to shop. But for instance, I work over here at the Chamber of Commerce building, but I park every day in this lot because it's the furthest away from my building. I know a lot of employees park right next to their back door. So I mean, a way to enforce that would be to go to permit parking where we all had to pay $10 for a parking permit, and the police knew that that was an employee, and if we weren't in our spot, we'd get a ticket. Is that a good idea? Is something like that a good idea? Because that's kind of educational too at the same time.
Yeah, that's a little bit of both, and it's kind of a price-based solution, but there's also a lot of educational components. I think a lot of the issues here can be worked through with the chamber, with the city, with the DDA, with the public, with the business owners, kind of working cooperatively to all kind of help the overall vision. Again, we're not necessarily advocating for meters, for charging everybody, for charging anybody necessarily. But I think all of that stuff should be part of the conversation at least. Permits, monthly fees, meters, whatever it might be.
And then the other thing that, just from looking at it overall, it does clearly seem that on the west side of the river, the parking could be an issue more in the future than our side of the river.
Yeah.
But I mean, what would outside of those would it be that we keep looking for properties for parking lots? Because you're not really advocating for that, are you?
No. To me, and again, I'm a planner, so bear that in mind. To me, the worst case scenario would be tearing down a building to build a parking lot. That's the last thing that I would want to see happen downtown. The area that you're talking about over here on the north side of Main Street and west of the river, I think that was the area where the study showed that was the biggest deficiency. And it's true. I mean, there's a lot there on Main Street. Now there's a lot of businesses there on Main Street, not parking lot. And yeah, it is tight there. I think, to me, exploring every avenue for on-street parking, maximizing all of those kinds of things should be stuff that we do first, before we would consider actually looking for a piece of property to buy and build parking, especially if there's a building on it.
So even pushing them in up like on the streets by the residential homes and that sort of thing.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, again, we'd have to work with those property owners and see what works and see what's politically feasible. But I think the conversation needs to be pretty broad and pretty open and examine a lot of different possibilities.
As a consideration, as far as being broad, have you considered a ramp? I know it would be expensive, but addressing the west side of the river, just so that people think about it.
Yeah, maybe.
For this $1 million, this is what it costs, or whatever the number is.
Yeah, I mean, something like that, even just running through the feasibility of that and figuring out what it would cost might be enough to really open some people's eyes as far as, you want parking, all right, this is what we got to do. It'll cost, millions of dollars. Ramps are great in that it's a more efficient use of land, but again, you're still building a structure there, and that, if you wanted to convert it into a building, is probably not going to happen. Service lot being converted into a building is a lot more, approachable solution. So yeah, I mean, it's something that certainly could be considered. As you know, the price would be quite high, and I'm certain of that. But yeah, I mean, if we're going to talk about everything, then let's talk about everything.
Yeah, just throw it in there.
Yeah.
It's part of the conversation, so either spend $1 million for a lot, or maybe a better use of signage and employee education and those types of things. So, and on the flip side, there was something in the paper last week how Grand Rapids, Midtown, is changing from suburban type of malls. They want houses around the more walkability, and that's what we should kind of strive for too, to make it more walkable and pedestrian friendly.
Right. Yeah, and to that end, the Planning Commission and City Council approved the mixed-use district in zoning last year, the year before. So the conversation about walkability and about mixed uses and about reducing overall number of spaces and putting buildings in, that's something that's been talked about quite a bit. And it's all kind of I think there's a lot of common vision between, all the different boards at the city that I've worked on, and I think a lot of the residents have got the same kind of vision too.
Okay, any other questions for Nathan or Andy? Okay. Okay, thank you very much, and maybe Sue, if we could get that report in our packet so we can kind of use that for further reference later on. So, thanks again.
Thank you.
Chamber of Commerce Summer Concert Series. Arrange here. Lowell.
Hello, everybody. The sunshine today is making me anxious for summer and our summer concerts. And talking about parking, yeah, our summer concerts are a challenge with regards to parking, but we appreciate the support the city has for letting us have the concerts. And so we're here again today. It's our 15th year of providing these concerts, the Chamber and Lowell Arts. And we really appreciate the support that you've provided us through those years. Primarily, the DDA's support goes toward marketing and for helping us to provide the free film at the end of the series. And we are just asking for your support again this year.
What did you do last year?
You've been doing 6,000 for quite a few years. I think it's pretty much since you started supporting it.
Any further discussion? Other than, I think it's great. It brings a lot of people to Lowell. It's got a great reputation. So, like 2 cents I'll add is perhaps maybe work with a farmer's market, and you got a captive audience, and why kind of boot those guys out? And it's going to be parking.
Right.
But I mean, they come in, and then you kick them out right when a lot of people come in. So. You work with those guys and see how that works out.
Well, we wouldn't say we kick them out. Their choices.
Okay, maybe.
I mean, it's a long day. It's a long day, and they've tried the late hours, and people don't shop it. So, no, don't say we kick them out.
Okay.
It's the choice of the market vendors.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Reports and member comments.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Mike.
Who's got the key to the clock?
That's true. I think they're getting ready for the time change. Ron has a comment.
I spoke with the company that did the upgrade on the clock. He is, today he's in Chicago. He's coming through town tomorrow. There's a special tool that is needed just to get into the controls on the clock. He's going to give me the tool, and he's going to show me how to do the resetting on the mechanism. It's a control module that's inside, so he's going to give me the training on how to do it. It looks like we sprung forward a little bit too early, so it'll be fixed tomorrow.
Anything else, Mike? Dean? I'd like to welcome Rita, newest member. Welcome, Rita. We don't always have such a nice lunch. So I'd like to thank you. And Well's pitching for that. Very nice. Meeting adjourned. You can go home to work and take a nap. So next meeting, March 10th. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Need a motion?
Mike Springer, is there a second? Second. By Dean. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. And anyone opposed can stay here.